Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the AI InterConnect podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and this show isn't about tech for the sake of tech. It's about the human building bold solution, solving painful problem, and designing the future of work, living, and value creation. And today's guest is someone whose work sits right at the crossroad of real estate infrastructure, financial access, and digital transformation across Africa. And we are today in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm joined by Chude Osiegbu and the co-founder and CEO of VENCO Africa, a platform digitalizing operation for gated estates, which are the multifamily home, and residential community across Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana. Chude, very happy to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Laurent. It's a real pleasure and looking forward to a great conversation.
That's wonderful. Yeah. First time in Africa for myself. I mean, for the show. That's going to be great.
Okay.
You have a wonderful company. Let's start with your story. You spent over a decade in ACP consulting, working in oil and gas before founding VENCO. What led you to take that leap?
Interesting question. So yes, in my other life, I am or was an SAP consultant, basically implementing large scale ERP solutions for mostly upstream oil and gas companies, but also manufacturing and other industry verticals. I guess really I've been doing it for quite a while. I mean, the last decade was at one company, but I've been doing SAP for probably close to 18 years. And I'd also got caught up in a number of small projects, that had to do with startups. And I found the whole concept quite interesting. I'm a bit of a builder myself, so I like to look at problems and see what solutions and it can be proffered to this. And I lived in a community at the time that was a bit chaotic to run because they didn't really have any, in consultant speak, any management information system. So I kind of translated, SAP experience to what it would take to more effectively run this community. And we piloted that for quite a while as a side hustle, as what we'd call a side hustle for me. And at some point, when I'd got a bit tired of doing the same thing as a consultant in SAP, I'd said to myself, if I could raise some money to kind of go full scale on this, that I would then go ahead and go full stream into it. And basically that's what I did. So I jumped into VENCO because I saw an opportunity there. I was able to raise some money for that opportunity and I wanted to try something new. I wanted to do startup and, I felt that it was a good opportunity to kind of do a startup.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love it. And then obviously, I mean, you're not young, but you're much younger than I. And yeah, that's a big leap after 18 years in the corporate world to be an entrepreneur. You like to build things, definitely. That's wonderful. And you mentioned in our pre-call that many people called you or VENCO PropTech, but you see yourself closer to fintech. Can you unpack that a bit?
Okay, yeah. So I would say, I mean, the more we think about it, the more we look like a financial services company. And, so to explain that a bit more, what are we doing at VENCO? VENCO is an operating system for these multi-tenanted communities. With increasing urbanization globally, and not just in Africa, we're seeing people build in communal formats. So for example, the community where I live in Lagos has 110 housing units, doors really, in it. And we kind of share common facilities, we share the same security, and all of that. So we basically provided solutions to do everything from access control, utilities vending, service charge collections, issue management, and all. But a big part of the problems that the operators of these communities are trying to solve is reliable and high collection rates. And what that means is that they want to make sure that everyone is paying their fair share towards the upkeep of the community. So what we've done at VENCO is we built a billing, collections, and reconciliation platform for them. a lot of that comes from my experience in SAP, where I was focused on the finance and management accounting domain. So we've kind of parlayed that experience into streamlining and automating billing and collections and reconciliation. What that has done is that we then have access to a lot of data, around the spending and payment cycles of these communities. And a lot of their collections actually pass through Venco. So we'll typically collect on their behalf from the residents and then remit or settle to their own collections accounts. And we do this because they are not really structured for that type of operation. They just want to run a community and, they don't want to run an IT department. They don't want to buy a big ERP and stuff like that. So there's a gap there that we've kind of filled, with automating those collections. And to a large extent, this is what many fintechs do. It's just that we have a very well-defined industry or vertical that we're addressing, which is these multi-tenanted communities. And as I say, they are increasing in number everywhere. So 7 out of 10 of any residential building that comes on the market, at least in the parts of Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana that we operate in, come inside the multi-tenanted community. So for us, it's a big opportunity. It's a sort of a captive market. When we close these communities by selling to their operators, in exchange, they give us access to all these households who are paying through us, right? And we are providing these digital payment tools which have been kind of catered to their very specific use case.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I'm just curious, and maybe for our listeners, the African estates landscape. What are these multi-tenant community look like?
Okay, great. So they look like, so if you think about in the US, for example, what you would call a gated estate, very similar concept, but not just that. So there's tons of apartment blocks coming up as well, because when you look at the unit economics of construction, right, that's where you get the most bang for your buck, right? So you'll find 20, 30, 40 units. I think we've even seen 80 units apartment blocks where it's like big vertical building, but there's lots of flats, within it. And again, they have exactly the same dynamics and needs as in your typical gated estate, which is more horizontally spread out. But it's not just those. So we also cater to marketplaces and shopping malls. So many marketplaces and shopping malls also have residential estate-like characteristics. What does that mean? So you're going to have shops in the shopping malls that are kind of managed by a central operator. Those shops have to pay service charges, they have to pay rent, and they have to pay for their utilities. So many of the things that we built for residential communities also translate very well to that. So I think on our portfolio now, we have maybe in excess of 30 of such, shops or marketplaces, some of them with as many as 1,200 stalls. So yeah, so that would be, what those communities look like. So they'd be 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, units. They would be detached villas, semi-detached. They would be terrace buildings. I'll probably share with you a picture of a few of those that we have on to help you kind of visualize. Some of the biggest communities in Africa, some of the wealthiest as well, use the Venco platform. So I think most people in anything outside of North Africa would know Banana Island, for example, which is a really big, wealthy community in Lagos. But because again, there's a lot of, how will you call it? There's something called Nollywood in Nigeria, which is like our own Hollywood, and it's very widely viewed across Africa. So many of the communities that we have, like for example in Nigeria, are quite popular in Africa, even though those Africans have never been there because of, just the cultural export of Nollywood as well.
Wow. Okay. This community could be big. How many units could it be?
Yeah. So we don't discriminate on size. Our smallest community is probably something like 10 units, maybe even 8, right? And our largest communities have up to 3,000 property units in them. So Banana Island, for example, has in excess of 3,000 property units. Our average property unit count per community is 80, somewhere between 70 and 80.
Okay, then that's very curious, and that's wonderful. And then, I mean, you mentioned it a little bit. How does Venco actually work? What are the main features, and who use them exactly?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So before I answer that, let me say that Venco is a B2B2C, right? A business to business to consumer platform. So our primary target and our primary inroad into the community is the operator, and that's the person whose immediate problem that we're trying to solve, right? So this is a company or a homeowner or residents association who is maybe having difficulty in, ensuring that the environment is secure by controlling who comes and goes, who is having difficulty in collection. So maybe they are not able to collect enough to maintain the upkeep of the community, and who maybe wants to find a fair and equitable way to allocate the cost of energy. And so many of these multi-tenanted communities will receive their energy in wholesale from the distribution company, and they need to retail it amongst their residents in a way that they can recover the cost and pay the distribution company. Because the distribution company, again, would rather have 1 point that they bill than maybe 80, 100, 1,000 points that they track. So the use cases for Venco are to help that operator to more efficiently run the community with digital tools as a primary objective. And then as a secondary objective, to make it easier for the residents within the community to access the community's services. So what are the range of services? The range of services are access control. So right from the gate to the house, Venco has an impact. So if you were to find your way to Lagos, hopefully one of these days, and you were to come to visit me in the community where I live, the way that it would work is that I would generate an access code for you from my Venco app as a resident. And you would present that code at the gate, and you would either have a keypad or a QR code scanner where you would scan it, or you would give it to the security guy at the gate or the receptionist. And they would verify that you are, an expected visitor, and they would check you in. And when they check you in, I receive a prompt that you've arrived. And then when you're leaving, they'll check you out as well. So this is the way that many communities now control, making sure that the person who is coming into the community is an expected and authorized person. So that's gate access side of it. Every month I have to, or my household has to contribute for service charges. So service charges is what is used to pay the security guys, the cleaners, to pay for the shared facilities like, water pumps, water treatment, common electricity for street lights, right? So we all the residents fund that. And there has to be an efficient way to bill for that because everyone has busy lives, for example. So if you left it to people to remember and to pay, on a timely basis, you may never, get all the money. So Venco has a billing platform within it that basically sends us bills, at whatever the programmed interval is, and also provides, payments channels so that when those bills are paid for, we know who has paid and we can actually clear out, their debt. So we are maintaining a ledger that basically says, these are all the people that have been paid, and these are all the people that have been billed, and these are all those that have been paid. And then it provides a way to send reminder prompts, to those who haven't paid. And then it gives a very clear, easy to follow dashboard to the operator of the community to know who has paid, what's outstanding, and maybe to take steps to follow up, those who haven't paid. It's the same thing with utilities as well. So here in most of Africa, we use prepaid utility meters. So that means that I have to prepay for my energy, right? And then I get a token, or maybe my meter gets topped up remotely. And then I run down the energy on the meter. And then when it's run out or almost run out, I'll get a warning again and I can top up. This solves a cash flow problem for the operator of the community, because they don't have to pay for my consumption and then chase after me later to recover the money. And this is the way energy, supply provision works across most of Africa. So Venco has a vending infrastructure that's also tied into the accounting infrastructure, so that when people purchase energy and pay for it, we are recognizing all of those, payments on the system. And also the person is getting value for what they've paid. And then, of course, in any big community, there'll be issues to sort out, maintenance to do, and all of that. So we've provided tools that enable residents to complain, or raise issues, about things happening in the community, and part of those, escalated to the appropriate actor, to deal with those issues. And then there are so many other things like, identity management, so that even residents themselves can identify that they are valid residents, of the community. So there's a bunch of other things. I don't want to turn it into a demo session, but yeah, so those are a few of the things that we, that Venco addresses. And it's a real lifesaver for the operator of the community, because many of these things they would have had to do manually. And once your community is anything really above 20 units, it becomes really difficult to keep track of, some of these things. And we've just done a system that brings it all together in one really easy to use platform.
Aloe, awesome. And thank you for that's what I needed. I wanted to know how it works. And okay, then you shared also that you have processed over $30 million in gross transaction volume already, with more than 45,000 property units using your platform. That's significant. It's unbelievable. What has been the biggest challenge scaling into that?
Okay, so yes, we processed about $30 million this year. In fact, as at half year 2025, and basically that's across almost 500 communities, which then translates to about 45,000 property units. So the main challenges there are, well, the standard organizational challenges that you'll find in a startup, especially in late early stage startup. We are, scaling the technology. So of course, as we ramp up on the numbers, we have more users. So we always need to make sure that the technology can accommodate and scale to those number of users. So every once in a while, we'll hit a bit of a wall, where maybe our design hasn't really catered to the size of the market that we now have. And so we need to. So I'm a bit of an engineer as well. So my first job was actually as a software engineer. So I'm quite hands-on with our engineering team in trying to solve some of those problems. So that would be one of the key things that we've experienced recently that have been something to deal with. Of course, processes as well. So it's not the same organization that you need when you were at maybe 100 estates, right? Maybe 5,000 property units, and now that you're approaching 50,000. So you're going to need to adapt in terms of the processes. Sometimes you reach the cap of, what certain personnel are able to do, and how they are able to adapt to the growth. So you need to, constantly rearrange things to, and also standardize things, so that rather than ad hoc solutions to problems, you're standardizing them, into processes, into canned responses, and stuff like that. A big part of it as well is training, so diffusing knowledge through the groups. Venco is still, I would say, relatively lean. So we have 35 people working at Venco across all of our locations. And sometimes you'll find that the things are moving at such a rate that perhaps they are just silos of information within the organization. Sometimes you'll be surprised that we built something and maybe that thing has been in production for the last 6 months, but there's still members of the team who don't really even know about these systems. So we're trying to standardize those processes, from a people management perspective. One of the big projects that I have for the last quarter of the year, first quarter of next year, is to implement a learning management system within the organization that kind of helps people to refresh on all the things we are building, because also we are releasing features at quite a fast rate as well. So we need to find a way to get everyone aligned and knowledgeable about what we built, even within the organization. You can't sell what you don't know. So I would say that those are some of like the top 3 things that come to mind, when we look at, the impact of our scaling and places where we have to make more efforts to make things better.
Very nice. Okay. let's talk friction.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
I can.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then let's talk friction. What has been the hardest part of building Venco?
Oh, wow. There have been many hard parts. It's probably one of the hardest things I've done.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe let's start from the building. So it was easy to build. Again, I kind of have the history, my experience as an engineer and as someone building, ERP solution. I don't think I would have had as many challenges as maybe a non-technical founder would have had. But the scaling part, especially as we've scaled, so sometimes these things jump up and just, and bite where it hurts, with no notice. And as you already have a portfolio, one of the biggest challenges you find is not really even to gain new markets, but to retain them. So sometimes you're going to find yourself in a situation where, because of immediate challenges that were unanticipated, technically, you face the risk that you may lose customers because the promises that you've made in terms of, what your platform do, you don't seem to be fulfilling them at that point in time. So for me, that would be it. So one of the things we've then done to address, that risk and that difficulty is we are now trying to preempt, we are designing our platform for when we're at 100,000. Right. So one of the things that we actually started to do is that we moved our platform from one where we would deploy estate by estate physical infrastructure for each of them. We moved it to something, not to go too technical, called Kubernetes, where it auto scales as more and more communities come by. And then, of course, we are now proactive in our monitoring so that we can see warning signs before disaster strikes. The other thing that's really difficult, I think, really from startups globally anywhere, but most especially in Africa, is talent, right? So we work in a service industry, right? So we need to make sure that we can find the talent who really understand what it takes to keep the customers happy and who are proactive. So when we hire, we say that we hire for three things: creativity, agency. So there's two C's: creativity, agency. One other thing I can't recall now, but essentially you have a lot of people in the job market, but not a lot of them are able to fit into a startup, type environment. So I would say that more people here are suited to more formal types of employment. But in a startup, you have to think on your feet. You have to be ready to do things that are not in your job description, right? Just to make sure that the business, is sustained. So I would say that talent is a big deal for us. And this is not just technical talent, but basically talent across the board. One of the biggest things differentiates us for Venco is customer support. We actually have a really good customer experience team. And we've invested a lot of time, and effort in developing the team, developing the tools that they work. I guess we'll talk about AI at some point. So we are infusing a lot of AI to also assist them, in doing really great work. So I think that that's somewhere that we've kind of been able to surmount that talent problem. But we also have the challenge, for example, in our growth team, and we are working out creative ways to also improve the outlook there as well. So, but I would say those two things. So really technology and talent, some of the challenging areas where as a founder, you need to, you really need to have a lot of focus, on those two areas if you want the company to continue to sustain itself and grow. And then I would say pricing and customer acquisition, but in a very unique way. We sell our solutions on a subscription basis. It's a software as a service. But the subscription is paid by the operator. That's the organization or the counterparty that we sign the agreement with. But we price our solution on a per occupied property per month basis. Now, as a cultural phenomenon, not necessarily because of availability of funds or, social standing, Africans like to bargain. Right. So the sticker price for your service is just it's a recommendation, but you're going to find people negotiate with you. And it's not about the money. It's just principle. So even if we were to come to them with a quarter, yeah, even if we were to come to them with a quarter of the cost as our opening price, they would want to go down, further. So that's one thing we've had to iterate, find multiple ways, to kind of standardize what it is so that we are not doing one-on-one negotiations with every new community that we come across. So when we started, we used to charge a percentage of the fees that we processed for the community. But we found that psychologically charging a percentage and charging a fixed flat fee per occupied property unit, even when they come to the same amount, the fixed flat fee is preferable to our customers. So we just had to go that way. And then we also augment our income from transaction fees for using the payment channels and the payment rails. But today, we actually make much more money selling and financing prepaid utility meters and doing CapEx financing for access control devices than even we earn from our subscriptions. So with our subscriptions, we are already running sustainably. So everything we earn from selling prepaid utility meters and financing them is then upside, and we have good margins there. So we've kind of found a way that works for us as a business and keeps us very stable and not under pressure, even as we look to ramp up our numbers, more quickly than we are currently doing.
Okay. I love it. And then you're pressing very, very high because you're going to get these very bargains.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then.
And the interesting thing is that it's the most wealthy communities that drive the hardest bargain. So rich people aren't rich. Rich people are rich for a reason.
Exactly, for a reason.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that you are operating across Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana.
Yes.
What have you learned about navigating those different markets?
Yeah, so again, a lot of people, when they think about Africa, they have a monolithic view of the continent. There are serious cultural nuances, across each of these. So to my mind, our biggest market is still Nigeria, followed by Kenya, and then Ghana. And then you'll find that the approaches to selling in each of these domains is quite different. Nigeria is, even though multi-tenanted communities are like really popular across all three, the autonomy of the communities differ, from country to country and even within the country. So our biggest market in Nigeria, for example, is Lagos. So in Lagos, the three main urban centers, or commercial centers would be Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt. So Lagos is where a lot of our business happens. Abuja being a bit of I hope nobody in Abuja will take offense to this, a civil service, it's the seat of government. So there's more a civil service culture there. They are less, even though they have a lot of communities there, their uptake on the technology has not been as quick as we see in Lagos. So I would say that in terms of the speed with which of adoption for the type of technology we build in Nigeria, for example, is Lagos, then Port Harcourt, then Abuja. We see the tide turning in Abuja though, but the effort to sell in Abuja is higher in Lagos. In fact, in Lagos, people are seeking you out. In Abuja, you have to do quite a bit of pitching, to converse them. Now, Kenya, specifically Nairobi in Kenya, is really open for business, right? So there's a lot of traction there as well, a lot of interest in what we are doing, and we are seeing the uptake, going up. So they are very open with the adoption of technology. And of course, there's tons of startups and technology providers in Kenya, in Nairobi. So it's very clear, in to our salespeople there when they're pitching that, yeah, these guys get it, and immediately, they're onboarding. So Ghana has been a bit of a more difficult market for us because I think that they are still very conservative in terms of how they approach the management of their communities. So while we have quite a few communities there, the lead times, for conversion, there's a lot of convincing involved, and all of that. So I would say that that's like, there's just different adoption rates, across these different markets. However, we are fully focused on them at the moment. There's still a lot of headroom for us to cover. We are not the only players in this space, so we see other players, at the moment. And one of the things is, why we know there's a lot of headroom is that while we are tracking competitors, we don't tend to meet them or compete directly with them in many of the opportunities that we see. So that kind of is an indicator that there's tons of, and we have a lead pipeline that's quite big or quite long. So that's an indicator that there's still a lot of, space for business to be done before we then try to even expand further on the continent. But even on the continent, there's tons of places that, we could still be in. South Africa is a big market for the kind of things we do. Egypt is a big market, for the kind of software services that we provide. So still a lot of headroom across the continent and even outside the continent. But at the moment, we're kind of focused on Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya.
Of course. Wow, that's wonderful. Very successful. You said something powerful during our pre-call, and that the real estate here is data. And can you go deeper into how Venco is using data to drive decision making?
Yeah, great. A big part of, when we look at real estate here, especially residential real estate and the solutions that Venco provides, there are really three legs on which it stands. Financial sustainability, which we are sorting out with our collections platform and reconciliations. Security, which we are sorting out with, the access control solution, that we have. Essentially, energy. So energy is a big part of living anywhere, right? And so that's why we've gone into the metering solutions and energy vending solutions. So if we look at the energy vending solutions, for example, because everyone on Venco, in communities that use Venco, is buying their energy through us, we're able to see how they use energy, what their energy consumption trends are. We're able to compare that community on community, and we can see communities that have more efficient energy provision and distribution, and those that have less efficient, provision and distribution. So one of the unfortunate things with a lot of, at least in Nigeria, which is our biggest market, is that communities still need to augment the energy that they get from the grid with backup generators. These are usually diesel generators that serve the community as a whole, right? So the energy mix there tells you how efficient the supply from the grid is versus the supply from, the backup generators. Now, of course, backup generators are running diesel, which means that they are emitting some sort of pollution, and they have a negative impact on the environment. So some of the data that we are collecting kind of gives us a very clear view as to how much impact on the environment that the community is having, through the generators that they are running. And then we actually have solar energy microgrid providers approach us, to say, hey, can you tell us something about the energy consumption trends of this community? And can you introduce us to them so that we can perhaps, provide them more sustainable solutions around, the provision of power. So that's one way where the data that we have, with the permission of the community, that we can share with the solar providers has, some sort of positive impact. There are plans for us. We built out a marketplace because all the residents in the communities use our apps. We built out a marketplace. So I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of, I think you have Glovo in Spain. There's
How do you say?
there's an Glovo. There's an e-commerce platform called Glovo. I think it's out of
Yeah,
Europe.
of course.
Yeah, so they're very active here in Africa
Out
as
of
well.
Barcelona.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, they're from here. They're from Barcelona.
So given the access that we have to households and they're using our apps, so we built a marketplace that looks something like Glovo. We've just started piloting it, right? And one of the things that we're trying to do is that we are speaking to, because we have visibility of some aspect of the household spend, which is what they pay in service charges and utilities payments, right? We're trying to figure out how, with that knowledge and with the knowledge of the spending power, and there's some sort of direct correlation between how much I spend on energy in my household and my spending power. We are trying to use that to then provide other services to the households and to see how much more we can get them to spend through Venco, right? So if you go on the VENCO app, for example, you'll be able to buy household, consumables, groceries, toiletries, and stuff like that. So think about it as a mini Glovo for the estate, right? And we're able to do that because, again, we can see people's transaction data. We can see what we think is their ability and willingness to spend. And then we can position the right type of inventory, to sell to them. Now we don't have a lot of interest in e-commerce. We don't want to be e-commerce players. We just want to be a platform where merchants can basically list their goods and services. And then we're just the gateway for the households to access those goods and services. We then make a bit of a commission on the sales. So a lot of the data that we gather in terms of the usage of our platform also gives us an idea what types of products to position to these households. And then, there's also opportunities around, especially in the energy space again, because we see how much people are spending on energy, as a community and as households. We think that there are opportunities to reduce that spend. A lot of people like bright lights, like, their houses to be bright. They don't really have a lot of energy consciousness. So they'll complain about how much they spend on energy, but they're not able to tie that with the types of devices that they use, the types of lightings they've installed in their houses, and all of that. So one of the opportunities that we see as well is that because we have the energy, the data on the energy spend and consumption for many of these households, we want to be able to use that data and kind of do deals with people or organizations that sell low energy consumption devices, right? So for example, air conditioners, lighting, and all of that. And because we have the distribution, we have 45,000 households, many of whom are vending, many of whom will have at least 4 ACs in their houses, and they will have TVs and they will have lights and, all of those types of things. So we are trying to figure out a way to do those partnerships so that we can help them reduce the cost of their energy, all because we have some data that helps us to index, and measure that on VENCO. And so there are quite a number of different use cases, but maybe I'll stop there.
That's wonderful. And okay, then how do you see AI playing a role in your roadmap?
Okay. So AI is already playing a role. So we use it increasingly in our customer experience, customer service function and department. So as I said, a big part of what we do is that because we have tons of people using our apps, we have to have support so that when there are issues on the app, when the payment has gone wrong, when I haven't received value, when something is, off, there's someone to deal with that issue from VENCO. And so one of the immediate ways that we've used AI is that when those issues are raised, so the primary channel over which we provide support is WhatsApp. So we use WhatsApp business integration. So you as the customer or the resident are chatting over WhatsApp, but that conversation has created a ticket on our back end, which we then use AI to automatically classify in terms of what is the nature of this issue, what is the priority of this issue based on the way the conversation is going. And those two things then help to route the issue to the appropriate person. And then we also use AI to kind of rate the way that the conversation went, right? So we'll give the user a rating, an opportunity to rate, but we'll also use AI to kind of say, hey, how did this conversation go? Did it go well? And all of that. And that feedback then, feeds back into the training loop for the customer support agents. And I think that has really helped us a lot in terms of the perception of the quality of, our customer support. We have a CSAT score as that Q3 year to date of, I think it was 4.5. So we are not doing too badly. And I think that there's been a lot of positive impact in terms of the quality of, support that we give our customers, but also in the ability of our team to learn. So one of the things that we have now as a project that I hope will get done in Q4 is also to take all the customer support history conversations that we've had and do some sort of training and build out an agent, right, that kind of supports in real time the real human agent that is providing the support, so that when you see the way that certain conversations are going, the agent is already suggesting approaches, and directions, to you. What that will also do is that it makes onboarding of new agents, quicker as we scale. Because as we scale, we'll probably need to get people on. So yes, there's a lot of, even I have some wonder as to where AI is going to lead us, ultimately. But for us, we don't really see it as a replacement for human beings. We see it as a way to make people more efficient. And I actually, at the moment, although my thoughts have not settled on the issue, but I suspect that perhaps AI will actually see an increase in the amount of work that people actually have to do, and not necessarily making them redundant. I was reading something the other day about how radiologists have become actually much more busy with AI tools than they were without it, because now they can analyze many more images than, when they didn't have AI. So perhaps this is the way it will also end with us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, what would success look like for Venco by the end of 2026, for example?
Okay. By the end of 2026, we found ourselves in 100,000 property units plus, right? With our platforms, still able to cater to people efficiently. We built out our marketplace and we rolled it out across our distribution. And then we've had all sorts of partners plugged into our platform to provide services to households, that households need. Yeah. We've also then established Venco because we don't look at ourselves purely as a technology provider. We also look at ourselves as a thought leader, and repository of best practices for how communities should be run. We actually have an event coming up on the 6th of November where we are bringing together ecosystem partners, facilities management operatives, homeowner residence associations, energy companies, security companies, and all of that. So we want to be the known brand. We want to be the go-to people when any topic that comes up around running communities. We actually wrote a book on how to run a community last year, kind of, is the positioning. So when you think communities, running them efficiently and everything, we want Venco to be top of mind for you. And of course, we want to have grown our distribution. So 100,000 households who are using us not just for utilities payments and service charge collections, but using us as a wallet holder. So we have a wallet that, we provide on Venco. They're keeping their money with us so that they can spend from there for other household spend, right? We want to be a major way that tenants also pay their rent to their landlords. So the same thing that we've done for the operators of communities, we want to do for landlords, right? In helping them automate billing for rents, collection, and reconciliation. So we want them to run their portfolio of properties on Venco as a virtual community. Yeah. So that's kind of roughly,
Wonderful. I love it. Then, as you mentioned, and we talk about that, you went from corporate life at ACP to an entrepreneur, and you mentioned your wife joked that it was like a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it become a mission. How do you personally stay grounded while scaling a high impact company?
Well, to be honest, not too difficult. So, it's something I'm passionate about, so driving around Lagos where I live, it's almost like, so again, my wife jokes it's like I'm a land surveyor. So I can't see any new development coming up without being interested in, okay, who's building that, and when is it going to be ready so that we can sell Venco to them, so yeah. So, I think that passion goes for a lot because again, running a startup is not the easiest thing that one could choose to do. So lots of challenges, lots of moving parts and everything. But I do feel that there's a big opportunity around just making communities run seamlessly. The community I live in, I think some parts due to Venco runs quite well. I wish that for all the other communities, around, some communities can be quite chaotic again because of lack of transparency, just not knowing how to run a community and all of that. Because again, I like problem solving. It's really interesting for me to be able to use not just the technology that we've built at Venco, but also all the best practices that we've learned working across lots of communities. So interestingly enough, as we help solve communities solve technology problems, we also learn something from either how well the community is doing something or how they're not doing it really well. And that has added to our body of knowledge that we can then share, with other communities. So I think that to a large extent, that makes it easier, because even though it can be hard, it's not a burden. So I don't know whether that makes sense, for you. But how do I stay grounded? I have to say that I spend a lot of time working and thinking about VENCO. Of course, I have a family, and I have to be very conscious to make time for them. So I'm the kind of person that kind of throws myself into what it is that I'm doing. So I have to be very conscious to actually pull back sometimes to make time for them. So that's something I think I'm doing better now than when we started 3.5 years ago. So I think that's one of the things. So I used to be very big on movies and, stuff like that. I don't know the last time I went to the cinema to watch a movie or anything. So these days I catch, I don't know whether it's the healthiest thing, but I catch short clips of things on channels that I follow on, and stuff like that. Yeah. And for fun, I just hang out with friends. So I have a few friends who are also, running startups. Some of them way ahead of us in terms of, the progress and length of time they've been at it than what we've done at VENCO. Just sitting with them, chatting with them, sharing experiences, and all of that is also, something that just helps anchor me as well.
Fantastic. And listening to podcasts.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
uh, Chude, this has been an insightful and inspiring conversation. Thank you for sharing your journey, your learning, and your vision for a smart community across Africa. Thank you so much for your time. It was great.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you having me on, and it's so much fun having this conversation. Thank you.
Great conversation, and definitely we should do it again in 6 months, maybe, or a year from now.
Sure. I'd be happy to.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode of AI InterConnect. And if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you.